This picture was taken on the Amalfi Coast in Italy last year with the Sony camera, and it was shot with RAW. And as you can see, it's kind of very bright areas in the sky and very underexposed foliage around the lower part of the picture. So we're going to try and improve this a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to go to the exposure adjustment and bring up the exposure just to around +1, and it's going to bring a little bit of lightness into the dark areas, but there's still going to be some detail in the sky. So that's usually the first thing I'll do with a very underexposed picture. Second thing is adjust the shadows. I'm going to bring the shadows up to around 70. I think that's pretty good. And as we got this overexposed sky, I'm going to bring down the highlights a little bit. Now there's some more we can do with this. I'm going to go down to the HSL saturation controls, switch to saturation, and with the blue sky, I'm just going to increase saturation on blue only. Go up to about 25, +25. And then a trick that you can do is to then switch in the HSL, switch to luminance and bring down the luminance on the blue. And that brings out a much deeper, brings it more of a deeper blue, so a bit more contrasty. And I'm gonna increase the saturation on green. There's plenty of green in this picture at the bottom here in all these plants and foliage. And one thing that often you'll find with green leaves on trees and plants is that there's actually a lot of yellow in them. It looks green, but there's actually quite a large part of yellow in it. So I'm going to increase the saturation on yellow, and I'm going to switch to luminance and bring up the luminance on green and see what difference it makes. Quite often I'll move to a more dramatic figure, so like +82, and then bring it back down to see what the difference is. Because when you're moving it slowly, you can't always see. So I think this actually makes quite a big difference. So if I'm going to leave it, I'm going to leave it around +50, and then the same with the yellow luminance. Now I'm going to go back up to the basic adjustment panel and give it some vibrance. So you have two controls, saturation and vibrance. Vibrance you can bring up a lot more. It increases the saturation, but it doesn't clip the colors when they're reaching the maximum. So it's much better if you're using it, say if you've got a picture with a person in there and you've got skin tones. So I'm just going to increase that to +25, maybe a little bit of overall. So before I go any further, this horizon is bothering me, so I'm going to just straighten the picture. I'm going to go to the crop tool and then just rotate it to get that horizon straight. Okay, maybe a slightly bit more. I'm going to bring this up a little bit because I want to get a bit more of the purple on the left. Okay, that's looking good. Okay, now I'm gonna make some adjustments using the adjustment brush here. So the adjustment brush is at the top right hand corner. So you can make local adjustments. So I'm gonna add some clarity. So I click on there, this panel opens up. And we're gonna add some local clarity to the foliage around here. So I'm gonna bring down the size of the brush to around 12. That's a good size. And initially I'm going to switch off auto mask. In a moment I'll just tell you what auto mask does, but for the moment I'm just going to have that deselected. And then the flow, around 30. So let's just brush in a little bit around this foliage here. And often it's difficult to see at first what's happening, but we can do a before and after in a moment just to see what the difference is. So like if I just go back on the left here, you got the history panel. So I can go back to the before I was adding a brush stroke to crop rectangle, and you can see that there is a little bit of a difference there, that it's adding a little bit of sharpness and clarity to this foliage. Now I'm gonna switch to auto mask here. I'm gonna reduce the size of the brush quite small to about 4.4, and I want to add some clarity to these columns. So the reason I've switched on auto mask is that if I run the brush over the stone columns, it's actually only going to be painting the adjustment brush clarity onto the column. And even though I'm going over the edge a little bit with the paintbrush, it's not actually going to be painting on the bits around. Now that's a really useful tool. It took me quite a while of using Lightroom before I figured this out. Now I'm going to go and do some adjustments on the shadows on the right hand side. These trees and foliage and plants are a little bit too dark. So I'm going to make a new adjustment brush. I'm going to just click on the adjustment brush, click on it again, and you have a new brush, but it will remember all the settings that you had before, which I don't really want. So if you want to just like cancel these, you just double click on the ones that were previously used and they'll go back to 0. So for this, I want to increase the shadows just on these trees and plants on the right hand side. So I'm just going to increase the size of the brush, and I'm going to leave the auto mask on because it's quite near the blue of the ocean there, and I'm going to do it a little bit more subtly, have the flow of around 19. With shadows it's very easy to overdo it quite quickly. Kind of like that. So that's a bit too much. So I'm gonna go back. And start with it again. With a little bit less flow and shadows. So as I mentioned before, I've got the auto mask on, so it's only going to be painting on that green, the green and the brown of the tree, and it's not going to be painting on the blue around it. I'm going to go down to the tone curve just to see if I can make just some slight improvements in the tone curve. So I want to see if I can improve the overall contrast of the picture using the tone curve here. So I'm just going to put a couple of put 1 point down here and just lift the upper mid-range a little bit. As you can see, it's brightening up quite nicely. I don't want to overdo the sky there. That cloud is quite bright. And maybe just clip the blacks a little bit at the bottom. I don't want to make any big adjustments here, but it just adds a little bit of punch to the picture. Okay, and I think this is looking pretty good now. So I'm going to go down. Okay, it's already got the default of 40 for sharpening. I think it needs a little bit more sharpening. It's not the sharpest picture in the world. And a little bit of noise reduction because we raised the shadows and it was very underexposed. There's going to be quite a bit of noise, so I'm going to bring that up to around 45. Make a before and after. So here we have the original picture straight from the camera as a raw image, which was very, very underexposed and almost unusable. Many people will just throw this picture away, but as you can see on the right, we've managed to make it a very nice picture just with about 15-20 minutes of working Lightroom. So hopefully this is an inspiration to get more into Lightroom, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click the subscribe button down below and like the video, and I'll be posting some more videos very shortly.